Chapter 14. Gandolin and Seraphina. Haille woke, rubbed his eyes, and listened to the familiar chirps of the jays. With relief, he realized he could see clearly, the pain in his eyes gone. He was laying on his back, looking up into a glass dome overhead. The support beams were not cut and measured planks, but rather the irregular twisting of tree roots, trained like vines on a terrace into a shape that held the glass above. Beyond the dome rose the majestic trunks of the side-on trees, but, unlike the cursed black trunks he had become accustomed to, these were a more ordinary red-brown, topped with boughs of green needles and clusters of fat pine cones, dripping with crystallized sap. The smell of pine was overwhelming and refreshing. Haille propped himself up on his elbow and saw his friends lying asleep on either side of him. They were not alone. Two figures stood before them, a man and a woman. He was dressed in the colors of the forest overhead, shades of green in his robe, and a tunic that was red-brown beneath, all of it cinched by a braided leather belt at his waist. On his left was a woman, she in the darker colors of the forest they knew already, a sash of deep red, a black robe with a twilight purple border. Earrings and a matching necklace dangled like silver teardrops. Her face was benign, friendly even. Their ages were hard to guess. Both had white hair, and deep lines radiated from their eyes and framed the corners of their mouths, yet there was a puckish quality to both of them. Haille immediately warmed to both of them, and as he stood up he noticed a third figure. The girl they had rescued stood just to the side of them. She was in fresh clothes, a black velvet skirt and a flowing white top, a thick belt hanging askew on her hips, and a broad sword resting in its sheath. Her hair was pulled back, and her face was bandaged where Storn had wounded her. Storn was not there among his friends, Haille realized, but the elk was, drinking from a pool filled by a tiny waterfall coursing over a sharp ledge. He could see fish darting and playing in the water, gobbling up the drops that fell from the elk's chin. Sunlight dappled down through the network of tree roots and cast the space in an amber glow. Everything bespoke peace and serenity, from the falling water to the jay's song to the wind he could hear in the trees above. Haille, even though with strangers, felt safe. His friends started to wake. Like he, they scanned the room and rose to their feet. "Welcome, and our thanks to you," the strange man said, spreading his arms wide before clasping his hands together over his heart. "For you have rescued one of our own, Violin Crossborn," he said, nodding towards the girl. "I am in your debt," the girl he had called Violin said. "This is Gandolin," the woman said, gesturing to the man who had spoken. "I am Seraphina. We are elders here." "Where exactly is here?" Val asked. The man and woman exchanged knowing glances. "There is much to explain. Forgive us, for we have not had human visitors in a generation," the man said. "Human?" Val repeated the word carefully. Haille studied the three figures before him once more, searching for something out of place. He and his friends certainly had had their share of non-human creatures, but for all appearances these people seemed normal. Perhaps their faces were a bit long and almost otherworldly in their beauty, but nothing so terribly out of the ordinary that Haille was alarmed. Then the girl, Violin, moved her hand to draw a stray wisp of hair back behind her ear, an ear that stood pointed. Caitlin noticed at the same time. "By the stars, they are elves," she blurted. Haille felt Val and Cody draw Caitlin closer to them. "If these woods are not full of monsters and myths," Val said. "We are no myths, I assure you," Violin said, an edge to her voice. "We are just as real as the vaurgs that we escaped from." "Vaurgs? Well, that seems like a fitting moniker," Cody said, testing the word. "What did you do to us? How did you get us here?" Val asked. I cast a spell of sleep on you. I'm sorry, but I had to once we were safe. Our home here is a secret, and I could not risk you knowing the way. But the vaurgs, as you call them, why didn't they catch up with us? They cannot cross the Gilithwain. Our people's power is too strong on this side of the river. You are still in danger, as you will be, as long as you are on this side of the Gilithwain River. Where had Haille heard that? So where does that leave us? Are we your prisoners? Val asked. You are our guests, but that does not necessarily mean we know what to do with you. And we have yet to hear from all in your party, the man said. Haille was sure Gandalin meant Storn. He reached down to find the claw of the beast missing from his belt. He would not miss it, but he did feel some debt to Storn. His mind raced with thoughts, explanations for how they had come across the wounded creature, even allied with him. All felt awkward, seeing how he had been the same imp to wound Violin. Absorbed in his thinking, Haille took little notice of the elk stepping alongside them, his chin still dripping from the pool, the jays perched in his antlers. When his mouth moved and Haille heard a voice, he looked about the room for the speaker, unable to resolve the contradiction that presented itself to his eyes and ears. The elk. The elk was speaking. Again he felt his friends draw close to one another. Caitlin gasped. Haille stood in dumbfounded silence, his jaw slack. I can vouch for my companions. They are honorable and good-hearted, the elk was saying. If I haven't lived to see extraordinary things, Cody said. And how may we address you? Of the Stygorn, I presume? Gandalin said, his face empty of the surprise Haille and his friends were feeling. My name is Adamantus. It has a name, Cody said. He has a name, Caitlin corrected. And it was your voice I heard in the carnival tent. You asked me to help you. I heard it too, and it was you in the forest who told me to use my sword on the vines, Haille added. Both true, Adamantus said. But why not speak until now? Val asked. Secrecy brings safety, Gandalin answered for the elk. But how did you come to be here on this continent, so far from your home? Men of the Servior took me from my place of hiding. A storm later provided me escape. The Servior's ship was lost and I swam to shore, but I was weary, easy prey for trappers. I was traded amongst owners until these youths found me in a carnival and released me. I am in their debt. In serving that debt, I learned that the same Servior who had interest in me had interest in them. So our lots were cast together. I have still to learn fate's final plan, but I know their quest has become my own. It is grand company you keep, Gandalin said. And a powerful ally, Seraphina added. Apparently, Val said, swallowing. So, what is this quest? Seraphina asked. The elk answered. He had listened and listened well. Adamantus told their story from the night they had escaped from the carnival, but he had pieced together more than that, including Haille's identity and what led him to the font of Jasmine in the first place. In a few minutes, the elk relayed their journey to Morbright, the font, and back to the castle, his mother's grave, and their discussion with Yana. Her words when she had met him, "He will reveal himself in time," made better sense to Haille now. How had Yana known? Haille, Val, and Caitlin filled in gaps in turn, but there were few. When they explained that their fears for Haille's father's safety rested upon nothing but an old woman's dreams, the elves betrayed neither skepticism nor judgment. They only nodded, as such a notion was as natural as clouds heralding rain. By the way the elk spoke of the vision, it seemed as bedrock a reason as any. Which begged the question Val asked next. We have revealed much to you now. You know our intentions. The way has been difficult for us. Will you help us in our quest? Will you help us to the southern borders of these woods? You have shared much in good faith to us, Gandalin said, but we cannot promise yet. We must consult with the other elders. It has been long since we have had your kind here, and never a descendant of Hilary Hillborn, he said, looking at Haille, the corners of his mouth drawing down in a frown. What does my ancestry matter? Haille asked. You can be forgiven for your ignorance, Seraphina said, but that might not absolve you. You should know the truth. Hilary Hillborn was once a friend of our people, but then, after arriving with his band of refugees from the south, he proceeded to persecute us. Persecute, Haille said. The blood of many innocents stain his hands and soul, Violin sneered. Haille felt unsteady, as if the flagstones beneath him were tipping like the deck of a ship at sea. He knew magic existed, didn't he? Caitlin said. That was why he banned it. Banned books, belief, and practice. He wanted it for himself. When founding a kingdom out of nothing, it can help to have powers of the other world. But he held on to those powers in secret, and was threatened by anyone else who might use them, Gandalin said. He was a practitioner of magic? Haille asked. Indeed. We taught him, Gandalin said. Haille noticed Caitlin rubbing the bracelet on her arm through her shirt sleeve, the magic bracelet that grew with her, the dragon engraved upon it. He remembered the magic of the font that had saved her from her mortal wound, and the fire that had flickered from Sade's fingers, the fire Haille himself had forced his will upon in the instance he needed to. Orans protendus filgrant aurors. Prince Haille? Violin asked. Haille came to himself. I'm sorry. It's a great deal to take in. It is. We bid you rest now, Seraphina said. Eat. The long night is over. Grant us your patience. We will have an answer for you, this time tomorrow.